Lisa Page, a former FBI lawyer and member of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, will not appear as scheduled before House committees today.
Page is fighting a congressional deposition, saying that the committees have not explained the scope of the investigation and have not provided her with documents they said they would. Well, with more on this story now with CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid. So, Paula, first off, before we dive into this, just remind everybody about who Lisa Page is. They've read her text messages, but they may not know who she is.
That's right. She is a former FBI attorney. She no longer works at the Bureau. She left over the summer, but during her time at the Bureau, she briefly worked on the special counsel investigation. And during her time at the Bureau, she exchanged tens of thousands of text messages with her coworker, Peter Strzok, who also worked on the special counsel probe and had a leadership role on the Clinton server investigation. And the text messages that these two exchanged have become a political flashpoint because they were extremely derogatory and disparaging of then-candidate Trump. If you look at these text messages, they refer to then-candidate Trump as a, quote, idiot. They talk about being in a Walmart, being able to smell the Trump supporters. And Page also expresses a lot of concern about whether or not Trump can actually be or get elected. And Strzok tries to tamp that down, saying, no, don't worry about it. There's a plan in place. We won't let that happen. So these exchanges have come under enormous political and legal scrutiny, raising questions from a lot of people about the integrity of both the Clinton email probe and the special counsel investigation.
So, Paula, what kind of questions do you surmise that the committees want to ask her?
Well, this committee has an oversight role for the Justice Department, so some of this is they just want to make sure that everything is on the up and up. The Office of Inspector General has already issued a 500-page report looking at this and has concluded that these two, their political biases, if they had any, did not actually impact the outcome of the Clinton email investigation. But it's still an outstanding question, what, if any, impact this could have had on the Russia probe. So I think what you're going to see here is you are going to see people, especially the president's allies, really hammering her on what appears to be, from these text messages, a disdain for the president. And again, this is two people who worked on the special counsel probe. So anyone who wants to undermine Mueller or undermine the eventual outcome of that investigation, they are going to try to point to her as an example of how the special counsel investigation is biased against the president. And the president has tweeted about her and Strzok specifically when he makes this claim that this is a, quote, witch hunt.
So, Paula, I'm trying to sort of rack my brain to think. I think she's the only person who has out and out refused to testify in front of any of these committees. I mean, other people have showed up and maybe not answered questions, but just not showing up at all. She might be the only one. You can correct me. Why is she not showing up?
Well, at this point, she says she would like to show up at a later date. Her attorney has issued a statement saying, look, we got the subpoena on Saturday to appear today, and we wanted to know more about what kind of questions we'd be asked. We wanted to know more about the scope. And if she was going to be asked about any documents, she wanted the opportunity to look at those documents before she appeared. Her attorney also says she went to the FBI yesterday. They were there for about 3 hours, and they were never allowed to see the documents. And as a result of that, her attorney said last night, look, we're not going to show up for this. We can do this at a later date after my client is appropriately prepared. So I think you're going to see a different spin on that sort of nuanced explanation. Some people are going to say, look, she is defying Congress. She refuses to cooperate. She has something to hide. Other people are going to say, look, no good attorney is going to let their client walk into a situation like this without proper preparation. And again, this deposition is sort of setting the stage for perhaps an eventual public hearing. We saw that with Peter Strzok. He did a private deposition like this. And then tomorrow, of course, we will see him on the Hill for what will likely be a very bruising public hearing.
And what do we expect from that hearing tomorrow, Paula?
Fireworks. I think he is going to get hammered by both sides of the aisle. Both political parties have a lot of questions for Mr. Strzok. Clearly, the president and his allies are going to try to hammer him on what he meant when he told Lisa Page not to worry, that then candidate Trump would never get elected and that there was a plan in place. And, of course, all of his criticism for candidate Trump. Now, I've read tens of thousands of their text messages between these two. They didn't have a kind word for anyone. I mean, it's almost as if they didn't know there are, benevolent adjectives you can use for people. They seemed very unhappy and didn't have anything nice to say about anyone. But when you're dealing with such a politically sensitive investigation, two of them really, you would think that they would have used more care in how they were discussing the subjects of these investigations. investigations. Now, I think Democrats are also going to have a lot of questions for Mr. Strzok because there was a several-week lapse when he was working on the Clinton email investigation and the Russia probe. There were several weeks that lapsed between when they first found out there were additional emails on Anthony Weiner's computer relevant to the Clinton investigation and when they actually took action, which of course pressed all of those developments into just the days before the election. Democrats are going to want to know why. Why did you delay that? Why did that take so long? Why was this handled the way it was? And I had to ask Mr. Strzok's attorney, why would he want to go into this kind of hearing? This is going to be a bloodbath. And he told me that Mr. Strzok is a lifelong public servant. He is one of the most experienced counterintelligence investigators the Justice Department has. And he wants to tell his story and he wants to defend himself. I've also spoken with sources who worked with him on these probes and I asked them directly whether or not he was in any way working to prevent then candidate Trump from getting elected. And they told me that is absolute nonsense.
Well, you know, both Strzok and Page have been sort of the butt of a number of jokes and memes. I can see why he would want to get his version of the story out because everyone else has been telling their story. I'm sure her attorneys will be watching very closely and taking detailed notes.
Oh, absolutely. And this is perhaps one of the most egregious examples of, hey, if you don't want to read it on the front page of the New York Times, don't put it in an email or a text.
Indeed.